Coco Gauff is taking her career in a new direction, leaving Roger Federer's Team 8 and joining up with entertainment moguls WME. And she has launched Coco Gauff Enterprises.
When the news broke that Coco Gauff had moved on from Roger Federer's Team 8, secured a major Adidas deal, reportedly worth around $30 million, and started her own company at just 21, it immediately caught attention. It wasn't introduced through weeks of build-up or a big media campaign. Instead, it arrived as a calm, confident statement that made the tennis world pay closer attention. Not because she had added another title or climbed further in the rankings, but because moves like this usually happen near the end of a career, not while a player is still in the spotlight. And while some saw it as bold and inspiring, others were far less impressed.
Everyone around me was like on board with it because like I know I could handle it. I think it was more just like on the mental side, like being there a lot of times, like mentally being on the site all the time can be like tiring. No, they were really encouraging because they knew it was something I wanted to do, and I was like, I mean, I'm young now, but I know eventually, I'm not going to be able to be playing doubles and singles and all of that. So I was like, I'm going to take advantage of it.
According to several courtside reports and people inside the tennis world, one of the first noticeable reactions to the news came from her biggest on-court rival, Aryna Sabalenka. And it didn't exactly look like a warm or friendly congratulations, which immediately raised questions about what she was really thinking in that moment, whether it was pure frustration or something closer to jealousy. To understand why Coco Gauff's announcement created such a strong ripple across the sport, you have to look back at the state of women's tennis just before it happened, where the spotlight had been constantly shifting between power, emotion, and explosive intensity, and no one embodied that more than Sabalenka herself, whose game is built on sheer force, thunderous serves, aggressive returns, and an emotional presence that can completely swing a match within minutes, as she often turns every court appearance into a headline moment. On the other side, Coco Gauff has been building her career in a very different way, first arriving in the tennis world as the 15-year-old sensation who shocked everyone at Wimbledon in 2019 by defeating Venus Williams on center court. And since then, she has taken a more patient and carefully managed path, developing step-by-step under structured guidance, including work connected with Roger Federer's Team 8, where her career decisions, media appearances, and professional growth have all been handled in a polished and disciplined way that reflects a traditional champion-building approach. Over time, that steady rise paid off as Gauff claimed her first Grand Slam title, became one of the most recognizable young faces in tennis, and built a clean, marketable image that sponsors strongly connected with, making her not just a rising star on the court, but also a major global figure off it.
So the extension with me kind of started in the whole campaign with the doubters. It obviously started with my speech at US Open where I mentioned, allowing doubters to fuel me to do better. And I kind of realized that a lot of things that are told to small business owners are also things that are told to athletes and me specifically, where it's like, I've heard a lot that I'm too young, or that I should just focus on tennis, or, you shouldn't do multiple things at once.
Aryna, on the other hand, was building her own legacy in a completely different way, driven by raw power, deep emotion, and an all-out fearless competitive spirit that made every match feel like a battle from the very first point. Because of these stark differences in style and personality, the media often painted the two players as clear opposites on the same stage, with Coco Gauff seen as the calm, composed young prodigy who plays with control and discipline, while Sabalenka was framed as the fiery, aggressive fighter who lets her emotions fuel her game in the most intense situations. For longtime tennis followers, this kind of contrast felt familiar and almost timeless, echoing legendary rivalries from the past, like Chris Evert against Martina Navratilova or Pete Sampras facing Andre Agassi, where two great champions could rise in the same era with completely different approaches, yet both leave an unforgettable mark on the sport in their own unique way.
I was just making unforced errors. I don't know, I have to check the statistics. I think she won the match not because she played incredible, just because I made all of those mistakes from like if you look from the outside, kind of like from an easy.
But then came the moment that completely shifted the conversation. And it had nothing to do with a match, a championship point, or a trophy ceremony under bright stadium lights, but instead came from a business decision that surprised almost everyone watching her career closely. When Coco Gauff made the announcement, it was brief, direct, and surprisingly understated for something of this magnitude. Music, as she confirmed she was stepping away from Roger Federer's teammate, signing a new long-term partnership with Adidas reportedly worth around $30 million, and at the same time launching her own management company called Coco Gauff Enterprises, signaling a major shift in how she wanted to control her future. There was no dramatic build-up, no heavily staged press event, and no theatrical countdown, just a calm statement that made one thing very clear: she was taking full ownership of her career decisions. In later interviews, Gauff explained that this was not a sudden choice, but a carefully considered move shaped over time, as she spoke openly about wanting more responsibility, not just as an athlete, but as a businesswoman and decision maker who understands that a tennis career is about much more than what happens on court. She emphasized that while the physical demands of the sport are intense, the mental load of planning, preparing, and thinking ahead for life beyond competition was what truly influenced her thinking, even saying that being realistic about the future played a big role in her mindset, adding that, "I'm young now, but I'm not always going to be able to play singles and doubles forever," while also noting that her inner circle fully supported her because they understood it came from a genuine place. In a sport where most players rely heavily on agents and large management structures to handle contracts, endorsements, and appearances until the very end of their careers, Gauff chose a different path entirely, deciding not to wait until retirement to take control, but to step into ownership while she is still in her prime, still winning matches, and still at the center of global attention, making this move not just a financial milestone, but one of the strongest statements of independence she has made off the court. It was essentially her way of saying, "This is my career, and I'm going to run it on my own terms," a message that felt empowering to some and slightly disruptive to others who are more comfortable with the traditional structure of the sport. And as soon as the news spread, attention naturally drifted toward Aryna Sabalenka, especially as both players were around the Cincinnati Open at the time, where reporters were actively searching for reactions from the tour's biggest names. When Sabalenka was finally asked about Coco Gauff's move, journalists nearby practice courts noted that her response was short and restrained, as she reportedly gave a small shrug and simply said, "Good for her, I guess," before immediately returning her focus to training. That kind of reaction stood out because, in elite tennis, players often offer at least a polished or supportive comment when a fellow top athlete makes a major career decision. And coming from someone known for her emotional energy and expressive personality, the lack of enthusiasm sparked even more discussion. It also reopened memories of their previous clash at the French Open, where Sabalenka, after losing to Gauff, remarked that she didn't feel she played poorly but instead blamed her own mistakes on easy balls, a comment that was widely circulated and debated for how it appeared to downplay Gauff's performance. Now, with Gauff not only continuing to win matches but also taking full control of her professional structure and future direction, the spotlight shift became even more noticeable, especially for a player like Sabalenka, who has worked hard to establish herself as one of the dominant forces in women's tennis. Even though Sabalenka later emphasized that she was simply focused on her own career and winning matches, many fans still sensed an underlying tension that never fully disappeared. And that quiet, unspoken edge between them only made Gauff's bold decision feel even more significant in the broader story of the sport, especially for longtime tennis followers who remember a time when top players were expected to focus almost entirely on the court without stepping so openly into the business side of their careers. Business decisions in tennis were traditionally handled far away from the spotlight, left to agents, sponsors, and large management groups who took care of everything while the player focused only on performing on court. From Billie Jean King to Chris Evert, from Steffi Graf to Serena Williams, the pattern stayed largely the same. Compete first, build your legacy, and only then, often later in your career or after retirement, step more fully into the business and ownership side of the sport. Coco Gauff, however, completely changed the timing of that journey by stepping into ownership and control while she is still actively climbing the rankings, still developing her game, and still shaping her identity as a top athlete, which is why this move feels so different compared to what generations of tennis fans are used to seeing. For those who grew up watching players like Boris Becker, John McEnroe, or Martina Navratilova, who often relied heavily on external teams for off-court decisions, Gauff's approach feels not just unusual, but genuinely historic. Music, because it challenges the long-standing idea that athletes should only focus on competing while others handle everything behind the scenes. This decision also reflects a bigger shift happening in modern sports, where today's athletes are no longer being developed solely as competitors, but are increasingly being encouraged to think like entrepreneurs, public figures, and personal brand builders who understand the value of ownership and long-term control. Even within the tennis world, a sport deeply rooted in tradition, discipline, and etiquette, players are beginning to reshape what success looks like beyond the baseline, especially as they become more aware of their influence off the court. Reports from within the WTA suggest that many insiders are closely observing this change, wondering what it could mean for the future structure of the tour if a 21-year-old can successfully manage her own business empire while still competing at the highest level, raising the question of why future stars should automatically hand over control of their careers when a new model is starting to prove that independence is possible. For longtime fans, this evolution may feel unfamiliar or even slightly uncomfortable at first, but history in tennis has always been shaped by individuals who were willing to break patterns and challenge expectations, and Gauff's decision now fits into that same legacy of players who didn't just win matches, but quietly and sometimes dramatically changed the direction of the sport itself, turning what looked like a simple contract decision into the beginning of a much larger shift in power. Music, what is quietly taking shape here, is not just a rivalry between two rising names, but a striking difference in mindset, personality, and the way each of them is choosing to move through their careers. Coco has leaned into silence, discipline, and long-term structure, preferring not to engage with outside noise, avoiding social media clashes or emotional responses in interviews, and instead focusing her energy on training, competition, and even building a business foundation behind the scenes, a level of calm and control that feels unusual and even remarkable for someone at her stage of life. On the other side, Sabalenka has always been the opposite of quiet, a player whose emotions are fully visible on court and off it, where her highs feel explosive and her frustrations are just as transparent, something that has long defined her identity as an athlete who plays with passion rather than restraint. Recently, however, something subtle has shifted in the narrative surrounding her, as more and more attention from media and fans has drifted toward comparisons, questions, and constant references to Coco's growing influence, often showing up in interviews where Sabalenka is asked to respond rather than simply focus on her own game, creating a layer of pressure that goes beyond tennis itself. While Coco is seen stepping into conversations about partnerships, branding, and future planning, Sabalenka often finds herself having to repeat that her focus remains strictly on winning matches and staying present, highlighting a growing contrast between long-term vision and immediate competition. In today's sports environment, where consistency, composure, and brand stability matter as much as performance, that difference is becoming more noticeable with each passing tournament. What once looked like a simple competitive storyline is now evolving into something deeper, where silence is starting to carry as much weight as emotion, and where two top players are gradually defining success in completely different ways while moving forward on separate paths within the same sport. Point one is quietly building something far beyond the court, shaping her future with careful planning, taking control of her finances, her public image, and the legacy she wants to leave behind, while the other remains fully locked into the present moment on the court, driven by raw emotion and determination, fighting to protect her position at the top of a sport that never slows down. Coco Gauff has not made a single negative remark about Aryna Sabalenka. She has not responded with criticism. She has not entered into any public back and forth. And she has not even suggested tension, instead choosing to move forward in silence while signing major endorsement deals, launching her own business ventures, and continuing to perform at the highest level where results speak louder than words. Sometimes that kind of silence becomes the strongest message in the room. At the same time, Sabalenka's visible emotions, whether intentional or instinctive, have kept her name linked to Coco's growing story in a way that is hard to escape.